Hello and greeting Earthlings. Welcome to Triangulation Station. I want to say hello to my co-host Eben and our wonderful guest, Miss Krista Lane. What we are doing is we are effective immediately. We're helping people and companies and humans interested in how to navigate this current layoff landscape better and in a more humane way. So this podcast featuring Krista Lane deserves quite an introduction for quite a person. So coming from Sonoma County, formerly a stage manager, an ecosystem builder at Yelp for their internship program, expert in helping people make decisions when it comes to their job search, and the main author of the Effective Immediately blog post on TripleByte posted yesterday, we have Ms. Krista Lane. So let's just start off with something easy. Krista Lane, we know that something major happened in your life recently. Catch the people up. Let them know what happened to you recently.
Yeah, so we're in the middle of April 2020. About a month ago, in the middle of March 2020, I got laid off, and that sucked. So did you too. So that's why we're here.
Woo! Wow, why didn't anyone tell me? Dang it! I gotta talk to my wife.
So this is our Zoom notification. No. Thankfully, we were in person. It was before a lot of the shelter-in-places that a lot of people are experiencing now. But yeah, that was a low point for sure. It really felt like kind of the rug got pulled out from under us, in a way that was not great. Especially given the timing of everything. I think the global situation around COVID-19 was really escalating, but had not really reached global pandemic stage. In fact, it was declared a global pandemic the day after we were laid off. So, and then the reason that we were laid off was a product shift. So our team and another team had been eliminated. So yeah, that sucked. We were the three of us and another our former boss were asked to stay on just to help our colleagues to find their feet and get back on their feet to the best extent possible, which has certainly been a roller coaster in a lot of ways. And then a lot of the work that we did, we didn't want to let go and just kind of let it live in a vault forever. So the three of us have taken on kind of open sourcing a lot of that work, and that's why we're here today.
As Kevin mentioned, part of the premises here is job searching. You have you're the person with the most in-depth thinking, both in terms of the immediate strategy in front of you for a person, in terms of advising someone, and just the bigger picture, like hiring scene. But so I want to start with this. In the middle of April last year, you have a Medium post on hiring. Then coincidentally, a year later, coming out of TripleByte, you have the blog post on layoffs. What has changed for you about how you look at those things over the course of that year, and maybe what stayed the same?
In many ways, some problems are still very entrenched and still exist, and maybe are even heightened in some ways, or less important in other ways, in kind of the COVID-19 era of hiring.
Give us a first example that comes to mind.
I think titles matter a lot right now. So the titles that you've had on your resume, I think, matter a lot to whether or not you will get an interview for a position that you are looking for. I struggle with this personally. I have never actually officially held a recruiting title, although I have closed many candidates and I have performed recruiting functions. And so if I were to pursue a recruiting position, I would be really challenged to get an interview for that position for that reason. So I think that's one thing that's really been sticking out from what I've seen from friends and other colleagues in their job searches right now. So yeah, I would say some things have changed, some things have not, maybe less important. I think, for example, like gaps on our resume, not going to be relevant this year, like next year for this year. I think plenty of people will understand that a lot happened this year. And so I expect that people in 2021 will probably not think twice about what a resume gap meant. They might still ask about it, but I think there won't be as much judgment as there used to be.
I mean, kind of like the whole premise of what we're doing here, in many ways, is like you have thoughts and a view on the hiring dynamic, on how people can be successful, what companies should be doing, can be doing better, that would even be better for them, which is awesome. I hope we'll get more out of that today. And there's so much of that folks can find on Effective immediately. And so that's true about you. And you're also presumably to some degree looking for a job. So it can be almost maybe a comfortable space to tell a person, a company, the world how hiring should go. It's another thing to have to find your own way through it yourself. So how is that going for you so far? How are you looking at it? Give us a rundown where you're at there.
Yeah, so I've been, I'm very privileged to have a comfortable enough runway to make a lot of the choices that I've made in my current job search. So with almost a decade of experience, I have an okay savings to take time for my search. So I've been spending a lot of that time reflecting on what I would like to be doing and spending more time kind of targeting kind of what the end goal is about my next steps. I think that anybody should do that regardless of how much runway they have, but how much time you take, I think, depends on what your runway looks like. The short answer to that is that I have not been actively applying to positions yet, but I have been receiving messages and responding to those on LinkedIn and just kind of taking inbound and introductions as they come in and working from there. But that's been really interesting too, just because it's not, some of those calls are interviews and some of those aren't, and not everyone is super clear about those. And maybe that's just how kind of networking when you're not actually applying to a job goes. But yeah, it's been a slow process. I don't expect to find something right away or tomorrow or anything. But I'm hoping to kind of find something closer to the right fit. But we'll see how it goes. My last job search took over 6 months, and I'm not sure how long this one will take. So we'll see.
Go, Kevin.
Yeah, I want to know about pain points. I want to know that something annoying that happened to you recently in any of these conversations, or something that was irksome, something that happened in this process, even though you're not actively looking. That you just want to talk about. Yeah.
So I had, I think 3 or 4 calls this week, and in a short period of time, where we're almost at it's Thursday today, so I'm like average of a call a day. The first, I spent probably about an hour preparing for each of those calls, or at least for the first 3. And then when I got to the 4th, none of those interviews turned out to be interviews, as it turns out. They were all informational. I think they were founders who wanted to talk about TripleByte and wanted to learn about the layoffs. And they were also, even if they weren't asking about that, they were asking just questions around like what I could tell them and help them to build their business better. So none of them were about job opportunities, which was a bummer because I hoped, since I spent so much time on those conversations, preparing for talking to those, like I looked up their company, I looked up their careers page, if they had one, I looked up, like the profiles of the people I was going to be talking to. So it was disappointing that it didn't really turn out to actually lead to a job opportunity or like that prospect. And then I was so bummed about that, that I didn't prepare for the last call, which actually turned out to be an interview. So that was fun.
Yeah, I've heard you describe this in the past, but I want you to say what you want. The people deserve to know that Krista's called the phenomenon that she experienced on those 3 calls that weren't interviews, to some varying degrees, rubbernecking. It's the hiring version of rubbernecking in the past. I just thought that's really interesting.
Yeah, I want to keep pressing like Kevin's doing here and go further into where you get stuck what's
Yeah.
hard for you. So the three of us have obviously had a bunch of conversations, including just before this, you all were kind of coaching me through a low this afternoon. There's a lot of highs, there's a lot of lows. We all react to those differently. You know, because I know you have a variety of looks on your last job search. And what the 8 months means has different context for you. And I imagine there were some highs and some lows. Take us into some lows.
Yeah. So I think what was really I think a lot, as probably both of you know, but maybe not the wider audience who might see this. I think a lot and I say a little bit less. And I probably spend too much time thinking when it comes to something like my job search or what I want to do next, right? So, and then sometimes I think out loud, and that's fine too. So I will often, like, the question that trips me up the most right now is, what do you want to do next? And part of it is I sort of reject the premise of the question. Like, first of all, right now, like, you want to ask me that? I just want to keep busy. Like, is one answer, and that's valid, I think. You know, but obviously it's a bigger question to think about what I want to do next for the next few years and whether I can do that at the company that may not survive in 4 months. So, you know, I struggle with that question because I get into kind of the deeper philosophical thing behind it, where I'm like, I don't know that question is a question I want to answer, or like, I don't think you want the answer to that question. I think you want the answer to a different question. So I get in my own way a lot in that. I just kind of get in this like spiral where I keep thinking about that. I'm like, well, what do I want to do next? Like, I don't know what I want to be when I grow up. Who knows what they want to be when they grow up?
Right.
What happened?
So, yeah, I mean, well,
like what
so
happened last time that you got that, or whatever, you know?
I kind of ended up, I come back to themes and impact that I want to have. So, you know, themes of my career, I've had a lot of different types of jobs at a lot of different types of companies. And the common theme among all of them is kind of building communities. Those communities might be really different. You know, in the nonprofit world, I, you know, was helping people build artistic communities, right? And in once I started in the tech industry, it was more around kind of building software engineering communities. And you know, so there's like, that's a thread that I can come back to that kind of unifies it, but that doesn't really have a clear path to the next step. Like, there's no step that is a natural next one for me. So yeah, I don't know.
What's the worst answer you ever gave to that question, or that type of question, where like you looked back and like, oh man, I know I have too many layers of thoughts, and whatever came out is, I'm never gonna do that again.
Yeah, so this was, I think I probably I was trying to be more specific, and I think I was too specific for that conversation. And so I said, you know, lately I've been really thinking about this kind of HRBP thing, like being a business partner at a company, where I can really kind of be a strategic partner at the organization. Which sort of shot myself in the foot because they didn't have any of those opportunities available. So,
they said, okay, well, we were talking about the recruiting role. Was that that one?
Which they did have both positions listed on their website, which is why I said that. But they weren't hiring for that one, so it was not going to work out.
What do you do to reconcile? I got one more, Kevin. I'm gonna let you go. Sorry, I'm gonna let you finish. How do you find yourself reconciling this dynamic? I mean, I think this is true probably for both of you, of assessing the recruiter and the company's process and thinking about what you would tell them to make that better, with trying to win at getting hired. And like, don't solve it. What happens for you about that?
Yeah.
Dilemma?
I really don't like playing the game. This is maybe why I want to fix hiring so badly. I'm going to play my own game, and the the right fit will either recognize my potential and my talent, regardless of how I'm going to answer their questions or challenge them in an interview, you know, or they will hire me anyway for some other reason. Or they won't, and then I won't have a job. But yeah, so I think like it's more important for me to stay authentic to myself than it is to, and I'm very privileged again to be in that position where I can say like, I really don't like this game and it doesn't feel right to me, and I don't want to do it, and I'm not gonna. So you know, to some extent I still do. I obviously still fill out an application, but or you know, have a conversation with someone and try to answer their questions, but yeah, I guess.
Yeah.
That's my
I was gonna say something that's not exactly relevant anymore. I was gonna ask you about something else that it's not.
You're welcome.
Thanks.
I did that to you.
I think we could take a little turn here. I'm really interested in having you shedding light on some things that a lot of people may not know about, with a really kind of specific use case, and just like kind of Eli 5 for the people. Let's say I'm a company, and I just got educated on the fact that maybe resumes come with a lot of privilege, and there's not an accurate way to assess people. So maybe I'm like, okay, well, we want to hire a software engineer. Let's start doing code tests. And I feel really good about that, because resumes in the common just out there today, they stuck. A lot of people don't like them. Something that's a skills assessment is very popular on things like LinkedIn, on things like Indeed, on companies like TripleByte. They're all about assessing your skills. What is a pitfall that could happen, or what is wrong with a company just saying, yep, we're doing code tests now, and that's going to solve our problem that the resumes couldn't cover?
Yeah. I think the biggest issue is like digital access, and what that means for underserved communities. So what often happens with people who are, or even just early career talent in general, if you don't know the tool that is being used to assess you, if you don't have practice with that tool, then you might not be able to perform and show the skills that you actually have in that assessment. So what happens a lot with a company like HackerRank or something like that, where a lot of companies will use a tool like that to host a code test that gets automatically passed, so that it's one question. You might get maybe two, but you might get one question. You've got one shot to figure out if you are skilled enough for this to move forward in this process. And that kind of one shot, like if you run out of time and you miss a typo that you can't find, like your tests don't pass, and then you fail the question. And there might not be a human who looks at that. There might not be a code reviewer who's going to take a look at that and decide that, oh, actually they did answer the question correctly, but they didn't close the function because they ran out of time, or their internet cut out in the middle, and so they only got half of the question. So those are the kinds of things that I think are the bigger pitfalls. But it's easy to get around that if you can afford the engineering time to review everybody's submissions, or to write your own questions. I think having engineers as involved in the process who will be interviewing candidates later, I think will give them a better picture about the types of questions that they want to ask.
I have a vision of people that have the kind of resources to like take SAT prep classes and take practice SATs and that kind of thing, compared to just, people that have nowhere near that level of access, and those two people going to take the same test, that kind of thing.
And then it gets to be lauded as unbiased, because that hasn't been, not that everyone doesn't believe that's true, but it hasn't been so publicly demystified that they agree with it. I mean, even right now, just like the automation and AI, it's still having to be, people are needing to show the biases in your same biases in your AI, for like the automated interview, like face recognition and all that stuff. Like it keeps coming out, but it's like a shortcut that to me seems like there's value, but by itself, you run the risk of thinking you solved the problem, and what you've done is made it worse and harder to address.
I know you did a ton of interesting stuff at Yelp. I don't know if you would call it like experiments or something like that, but I know that you found out a lot of things. You have a lot of findings in a kind of researcher way that a lot of people just aren't aware of because they aren't somebody who's built that ecosystem or looked at what kind of hiring process are the most accurate or equitable or that kind of thing. It can be about code reviews, and you may think I'm putting you on the spot, but hey, you're the interviewee, so we could do that.
Yeah, we did to you.
The Yelp findings that are, you know, one or two like really interesting things that you found out about hiring in general, about things that companies do wrong, about something you learned along the way. Just share with the people something that you wish that more people would know.
Sure. Well, I don't know if everybody will find this as interesting as I do, but we did do a study internally. I don't know if I'm allowed to talk about this, but we'll hope that the lawyers don't get mad at me. Anyway, we wanted, our hypothesis was that so in the intern program, there would be kind of the initial interview that got them the internship. And then there would be another evaluation period where we would determine whether we give them an offer to come back. And so once we started actually doing that in more than a yes or no way, I built a process for us to evaluate them on the same scale in both instances. Anyway, once we had data that we could actually compare side by side, our hypothesis was that we could predict based on initial interview results whether or not we would move forward at the end of the summer or program, with those candidates. And there was no correlation. So it did not matter if you barely passed and got an internship or if you aced it to get the internship. And in some ways that was actually really reassuring because it said to me well, I'm sure it was upsetting for the interviewing team to learn that their interviews might have been a little bit arbitrary, but or at least were not as predictive of success as they expected them to be. But it was exciting for me to show that a lot of the candidates who had done not so great or who kind of like barely passed were generally younger in their this was usually their first internship. And so I think that probably said more about like what we were asking and how we were asking it and how we were evaluating them. So we didn't actually continue the study. There were like a lot deeper questions that I wanted to get into that we didn't have time for, before priorities kind of shifted. But that was a really interesting one that I was like, oh yeah, like I want to get into more like sentiment analysis, like, oh, is this interviewer really hard? So like, is a 2 from this person like basically a 3 from somebody else? How it might differentiate that way. Yeah, that was an interesting one. That like proving yourself on the job, I think is more beneficial than people give it credit for.
That's like the only answer to me that's not arbitrary in the hiring process. Like this current thing that I've been thinking a lot about lately is like that's the clear answer, because resumes or tests or this thing you were doing at the beginning to assess them at the end, or just like anything is just like, I don't know. I guess what I was thinking is like, anytime they do a study on the human brain, they always say, well, in the end, we have a lot more to learn about the brain than we actually know right now. And I just feel like with hiring, it's just this common thing of like, well, the thing that we thought was really great is actually pretty arbitrary. Like no matter what it is, like whether it's like gut feel friend tests from like 20 years ago, or whatever, a lot of people still do them now. So these kind of assessments you're talking about now. I guess something where I get stuck is that it seems like the obvious answer for how to see how somebody would do in the job is to have them do the job for a limited time and just see how they do. So I don't have a question in that. It's just something that I'm currently frustrated with, in that there are seemingly no answers and maybe that answer all at the same time, but that answer is something that like people just don't want to do. If I'm a candidate, I don't want to go work for you for a week for you to decide if I can like do your job or whatever. So I don't know. That's my gripe, personal.
Oh, this is it. So there's, I think I saw on LinkedIn their whole business model is we help companies do these like temp to hire things or whatever. Like we help you make those contracts so that you can use that as part of your hiring process. And but that, yeah, like you said, that comes with its own kind of trade-offs or whatever. So I'm like kind of curious, like Krista, in all your sort of like expertise so far in the different views that you've had and sort of data points that you have and things that you've seen people try, like what might you suggest a company do? Not necessarily to fix it. That's not a silver bullet, but like, let's put that, I don't know if you want, like whatever size you want to take, like 100 people, 500, 2,000, 30, whatever it is. And they say, we read everything you wrote, Krista. We want to do this well. We know there's not the right way, but where should we start? Or how would you advise them through figuring out their hiring process?
I think the intentionality is already a really big step. Having the desire to be better at interviewing and the humble attitude and the growth mindset that it can be better, and to take that approach with just assessing every step of the process is already a high bar for many companies. And I don't mean to denigrate a lot of companies, but I think that just a lot of people just don't think about it. They don't have time. And so for a company, if a company were ever to come to me and get to that point, I would be very excited to work with them because they've already done probably what I would consider to be the hardest work of admitting that they need help and or that they want help and that they want to do better. That's often a really hard sell in an organization to get them to want to do that work. And a lot of other hard work too, like diversity and inclusion, and just thinking about accessibility and intersectionality and all, and you know, that all of that is so challenging to get organizations really fully on board and wanting to do that work. So yeah, I'd say that's the first step. That's probably not really a specific answer.
No, but I'm gonna push you. That was a great answer, and I'm gonna push you to give some maybe like some like key ingredients that they should consider trying to do, like some best practices that you would advise, even if it's not a formula for how you fix everything. And what I'm gonna do for that is I'm gonna let you think about it for a moment because we're gonna switch over because we're still doing this for free and unemployment hasn't kicked in yet, so we don't have Zoom Pro. Maybe the donation link will go here. We haven't set that up yet either. Welcome back to Triangulation Station and Effective Immediately. This part may get cut, but I'm doing it just in case I don't have the tools to cut correctly. Krista, we were just talking a little bit about how you would create this silver bullet for the dream company that came to you and said they were ready for you to fix hiring. Obviously, it's a big ask. What might be something like the top 3, top 5, or whatever best practices that you would like encourage a company to do that wanted to be very intentional on hiring? What are some of those?
So I would probably start at the beginning of the process at the job description stage and just do a little bit of kind of introspection on, is this job description what you want people to do? Does it describe what you want the job to be? How do your team members complement what you are asking for or what you're seeking in a new member of your team? Sometimes those people are different and sometimes those people are similar. Depends on what you need on your team. And then kind of what else do you need? And then once you've gotten the job description kind of settled and you feel like that's what you want, there's also other things you can do on the job description to make it appealing to candidates that you might envision as kind of the person who might fill that role. And then once you've done that, you could start to take a look a little bit about like the questions that you might ask in your interview, or how you might ask them, what kind of formats you use, how accessible those are to your pipeline. Thinking about kind of, is this question that I might ask, first of all, test it on your team members. Can my team members answer this question in the time that I'm giving this candidate to answer the question? And does the answer, do I need the answer or am I looking for something else from that response to that question? Whether that's problem solving skills or technical communication or some other aspect, like figure out what you're going for, what you're trying to evaluate in each question, and whether that question is reasonable to ask in the time frame given. Assuming that, start with your team members. If they can answer it in that time frame, they might still have a leg up over other people who might be completely cold to your style of asking a question or the environment, and then try maybe a stranger. Do a practice interview with someone from another company, and see how that goes. So I think those two would probably be, that would be a lot for a good start. And that might reveal quite a bit at the top of your funnel.
So there's this unifying theme here of like, get the data and do it with humans.
Yeah.
And, you know, like take the time to do that. Like get actual data that you can use, test how you can use it, but make sure humans are part of that process so that you can kind of access all of the insights to that. So cool. So that's really awesome. I want to ask one more question as sort of like you fixing the process, and then I'll pass it over to you, Kevin, for wherever you want to take it from there. I'm a recruiter at a company, and I've read all of the Krista manifesto, and I love it all. And I have limited, you know, impact on the policies and the procedures that my company uses, but I am talking to people every day. What would you encourage me to either do differently or to focus on, or to like, you know, pitfall to avoid or whatever? Like, what like one or two things would you give to that recruiter?
I mean, I guess would this, in this scenario, does this person have no like hope of building the kind of capital that would influence those changes? Or
great question, because you always go, I think I'm going big, and then you make it bigger. This is great. I'm gonna give it as a two-parter. What should they do? What would you encourage them to try and do internally? And then what would you encourage them to do that they can control immediately in their own process or their interactions with candidates?
Yeah. So yeah, I think in the first case, kind of what they can do internally. Obviously, it's going to look different in every organization and with every you know, person's background or team's background. You know, how that influences kind of what the power dynamics look like at your company. But you know, I think it's worth asking questions and just showing interest and engagement in challenging the status quo. That doesn't mean like complaining about everything, everything is terrible or whatever, but that can look more like, you know, in good faith, asking like, why do we do it this way? How long have we been doing it this way? Is there an opportunity that we might take to try something different? Or is there, you know, an opportunity to run an experiment or run a pilot and see if we might be happier with the results from that experiment? Being engaged in that way, I think, is also really impressive to a lot of managers who want to see you kind of, you know, showing an interest in kind of taking your job a step further and not just doing what you're asked. Yeah, and then I think the second part of the question is more around like what you can do a little bit more immediately. I think being as authentic as you can be with your candidates about the process and the limitations of that process is really valuable. You're building a relationship with that candidate, even if that's not going to work out for that company. That candidate will probably remember you, will remember what they felt about you in that process. So focusing on that relationship, I think, is more important than whether you know, you're getting them with any kind of gotchas on some question that might not really be helpful. So staying authentic and kind of being as honest as you can be about the process with them.
Nice. All right. This is a part of the class called Yogi Recess. So when I go to yoga, Chris, you've been doing a lot of yoga lately. When I go to yoga, my teacher says, okay, so if you want to do handstands today and you didn't get the chance to do that, this is your time to do that. You know, if you wanted to do a little bit more, you know, grab it, pose, you didn't get to do that, you get the time to do that. So for you, for our yoga class today, what's something that you've been like thinking a lot about lately, or something you've been like mulling over, or just something that we didn't get to talk about today, but you think it's important and that more people should be thinking about it? That's either slightly relevant to what we're talking about, directly, anything to do with hiring or privilege or layoffs, or I'm trying to give you really wide scope so you can choose anything. Just anything that's relevant.
It's too wide. It's like looking at a full refrigerator and deciding what kind of snack I want.
Yeah, give them a snack. They want a snack. They don't need a whole meal. Just a snack.
I know. But it's too big. We covered a lot of ground today, I think, actually. so I'm not sure that I have things that I didn't talk about. I did have a little amendment to one of my earlier questions. Was around like what I want to do next, and why I have such a hard time with that question. Part of it is like, I think I mentioned earlier, kind of rejecting the premise of the question, but I think it's also that like, it doesn't matter. Like, like and also what's really challenging about it too is that like, it's this little dance that happens in the interview, right? Where like, they want you to say something that matches perfectly with what exactly they want out of their candidate for that role. But I don't know what that is. They have not clearly communicated that information to me. And also because I'm an open-ended kind of problem solver who could do a lot of different things, like I don't really have like one specific thing that I know that I want to do. So how do I communicate? I just want to solve meaty problems and build communities while I'm doing it. And make things better for a lot more people in a way that gets me a job.
That was a great answer that touched me personally. I was like, that was on fire the way you said that one.
I got to point out too that you just did the thing. You did the thing of like, I'm not going to answer that question.
Yep.
That's too big.
Yep.
And here's what you need. Here's what I need to give you.
Yeah.
It was beautiful.
Yeah.
Well done. All right. Well, this is our guest's least favorite part of our interview process and our host's favorite part of our interview process. Krista, you're our interviewee today. We don't have a sign off. That wouldn't make any sense for the hosts. You have the sign off. So please enlighten the people, or send us off out of here in whatever way you see fit. We will be using this for the rest of time for all of our sign offs. Thank you very much.
No pressure. Yeah, times are tough right now. We got to help each other out. Be good humans, make some good choices.